All right, welcome to This Explainer. If you are a young professional trying to figure out how to actually build your net worth, well, you're in the exact right place. Today, I'm going to step in and act as your personal financial advisor. Why? Because we need to do a serious audit on what is probably going to be the absolute biggest financial transaction of your entire life, buying a house. We're going to strip away all the emotion, run the actual math, and figure out if buying a home right now is really the best move for your wealth.
Renting is throwing money away. Man, I know you've heard this one. Your parents have probably said it to you, right? And your friends who just bought houses, they definitely say it. But I want to acknowledge right off the bat that this is hands down the single most pervasive financial myth you've been sold by society. And honestly, if you make your life decisions based purely on this one little sentence, you might end up costing yourself hundreds of thousands of dollars. No joke.
So I want to frame our entire explainer today around one critical question. Is your house a wealth machine or is it a lifestyle purchase? We really have to contrast our emotional desires, the white picket fence, the feeling of stability, with the harsh mathematical realities of today's housing market. Because if you can master this paradigm shift, you are going to be leagues ahead of your peers in building true liquid wealth. Section 1. The home ownership wealth trap. Let's dive right into this. Okay, we need to completely dismantle the core beliefs you probably hold right now. Basically, there are 4 broken myths driving almost every single home purchase. 1. That renting is just throwing money away. 2. That a house is forced savings that'll somehow build your wealth even if you aren't disciplined. 3. That real estate always goes up. And 4. That buying is just the default way ordinary people build wealth. Now, I gotta warn you, every single one of these points is either flat out wrong or they're only true under very specific conditions that literally nobody mentions at the closing table. And the gap between these stories and mathematical reality, well, that is exactly where your money disappears.
Just to prove it to you, 1 to 2%? Yeah, that is the actual historical long-term appreciation rate of real estate above inflation. I know. People remember the crazy double-digit returns from a few hot years recently. But over the long run, housing barely outpaces inflation. This completely shatters the myth that a house is some high-yield wealth-generating machine. Actually, right now, in a lot of major metros, home prices are technically losing to inflation. Crazy, right?
Section 2. Unmasking the hidden costs. I want to introduce you to a case study from our source material. Let's call him Aaron. Now, Aaron is the smart buyer. He did everything right, he saved up a massive down payment, and then he fell right into the trap of only comparing his new mortgage payment to his old rent. He bought a $400,000 house, put 20% down, at a 6.5% interest rate. But what's really interesting here is that out of his roughly $2,022 monthly payment, a massive $1,733 goes straight to the bank as interest. Only $289 actually goes toward his principal equity. Because of how early amortization works, an overwhelming chunk of Aaron's payment is just evaporating into thin air. It's gone, literally exactly as gone as rent. So the absolutely crucial point here is that interest isn't the only money you set on fire when you own a home. You have to account for unrecoverable costs. Historically, financial advisors use the 5% rule to calculate these hidden costs. But because today's interest rates are hovering around that 6.5% mark, we actually have to use the adjusted 7% rule. Basically, you lose 1% of the home's value to property taxes, 1% to maintenance, the roof, the HVAC, the water heater going out, and about 5% to the cost of capital. So that 7%, that is the true monthly cost of owning before a single dollar of actual wealth is built. And that brings us to the invisible killer of wealth, opportunity cost. Aaron put down $80,000. He's super proud of it. But sitting there in home equity, it's returning basically nothing in real terms. Now, if he had taken that exact same $80,000 and just invested it in a basic S&P 500 index fund, earning a conservative average of 7% a year, it would grow to roughly $112,000 in just 5 years. By parking his cash in his house, Aaron is completely missing out on compounding market returns. It's honestly the most expensive mistake in the whole transaction, and there is zero line item for it on a mortgage statement. All right, Section 3, a tale of 3 buyers. Let's look at a 5-year projection comparing Aaron, a highly disciplined renter, and a coworker we'll call Scott. Now, consider Scott's tragic irony here. Scott fully believed renting is throwing money away, so he went out and bought the absolute maximum house the bank would approve him for, a $475,000 home. But he only had 10% down. By stretching himself that thin, he triggered private mortgage insurance, or PMI.
When you add up his interest, the taxes, insurance, upkeep, and that PMI, Scott is throwing away $3,400 every single month in unrecoverable costs. He literally upgraded from a $2,000 rent to setting $3,400 on fire every month, all just so he could call himself an owner. And this brilliantly illustrates the final scoreboard. After 5 years, Scott is the furthest behind. He's buried in interest and PMI with barely any equity to his name. Now, Aaron, our sensible buyer, he decides to sell. But because it costs about 6% to sell a house, plus the closing costs he already paid to buy it, his net gain over those 5 years is a measly $3,600. Ouch. But now look at the renter. She rented for $2,000, and she invested that $80,000 down payment she would have used, plus all her monthly savings. After 5 years, she has $190,000 in liquid wealth. Mathematically, the renter just completely destroys the homeownership myth. But I really cannot stress this next point enough. The renter only wins because she invested every single dollar that buying would have cost her. This is the absolute critical caveat here. Renting only mathematically beats buying if you possess the rigorous financial discipline to take your unspent down payment and your monthly savings versus mortgage and pump them directly into the stock market. Because if you just rent to fund a nicer lifestyle, taking more vacations, leasing a nicer car, well then renting loses big time. Moving on to Section 4, your 4-step buying blueprint. Okay, I'm going to give you the concrete tools to make this decision logically, completely removing all that societal pressure. Here is your advisor's math checklist. Before you even think about speaking to a real estate agent, you need to run these 4 steps. First, check the price-to-rent ratio. You just divide the purchase price of the home by the annual rent of a comparable place. If that number is over 21, renting clearly wins. Second, apply that adjusted 7% rule we talked about to see your true monthly unrecoverable costs. Third, calculate your break-even horizon. And fourth, if you do decide to rent, you absolutely must commit to investing the difference. I actually want to pause on step 3 for a second, the break-even horizon. Look, real estate is a highly illiquid asset. It costs roughly 3% in fees just to buy a house, and then another 6% in agent fees to sell it. Because of this massive friction, it generally takes a minimum of 4 to 6 years of living in the home just to break even on those transaction costs alone. So if you aren't absolutely certain as a young professional that you're going to stay in that specific home past this horizon, that uncertainty carries a very, very steep financial price. Which brings us to our final section, Section 5, Lifestyle versus Wealth Machine. It is time to completely redefine what a house actually represents to you. See, the biggest problem is that most buyers are just measuring the wrong metrics. Scott, he measured pride. He wanted the status of owning the biggest house, which at the end of the day is a lifestyle choice. The renter, on the other hand, measured the math and her total liquid wealth. Now, let me be very clear here as your advisor. Stability, control, and the pride of owning your own domain, those are incredibly real benefits, and they're absolutely worth paying for. But you have to recognize that they are a lifestyle purchase. A primary residence is not a compounding wealth strategy. Ultimately, you guys, the decision was never really rent versus buy. It was running the math versus believing what you were told. You just cannot let real estate agents who, remember, are paid a commission based on how much you spend, or mortgage lenders who make more interest the more you borrow, set your financial anchors for you. So I'll leave you with this final provocative question. Before you sign that 30-year mortgage, have you truly run your own numbers? Please don't just inherit someone else's financial beliefs. Use the blueprint we went over today in this explainer. Calculate the price-to-rent ratio, factor in that invisible opportunity cost, and master the math of your own life. When you do that, whether you choose to rent or buy, you'll be making a